The first thing is the people. Obviously, this business is about the connections you make and the people you trust. And the most important people that I trust in this industry are at this company.
The new beginning. Other companies are doing things the same way they've always done them. And so having a new opportunity to do things a different way is what really intrigued me.
I'd say from a sales perspective, what I love most is that we have really the best of both worlds. So we're a big multi-billion-dollar international company with great financials, but on the other side, we also feel very much like the small little family-run company.
I like the safety of First American, but they've got a human side to them, a little softer, gentler approach, and I really appreciate that, and they've really given me a great opportunity to go out and try and build something for them.
In Colorado, guess what? We're all local. There's 4 local underwriters, and together the other day we have almost 125 years of local underwriting experience in Colorado. And I tell that to people all the time, and that's really the big difference. We can make local decisions quickly to get that deal to the closing table. That's the big difference.
We're a team, and we support each other and look out for each other, and it really promotes more business for us.
First American is all about a work-life balance, and the leadership is incredible because they truly care about the customers or the associates that work here.
This is our customer service department, and the marketing support services that are just completely robust. Marketing is a challenge for a lot of real estate brokers. It's something they have to do, but it takes a lot of time. It can be expensive, and we have a fulfillment solution that is far and away better than anything else that our competitors have to offer.
The leadership is very down to earth, and they move very quickly. So anytime I've needed something or had to support a customer or had to make a decision that maybe cost the company money or whatever, they're very quick to make a decision on that stuff.
You're working with people who have been in this market, in the Colorado market, for 30 plus years. At one point, First American was underwriting almost 70% of all transactions in Colorado, and some of those very people were working on those files.
I really believe our people are passionate about our company and do it better.
The first thing is the people. Obviously, this business is about the connections you make and the people you trust. And the most important people that I trust in this industry are at this company.
The new beginning. Other companies are doing things the same way they've always done them. And so having a new opportunity to do things a different way is what really intrigued me.
I'd say from a sales perspective, what I love most is that we have really the best of both worlds. So we're a big multi-billion-dollar international company with great financials, but on the other side, we also feel very much like the small little family-run company.
I like the safety of First American, but they've got a human side to them, you know, a little softer, gentler approach. And I really appreciate that. And they've really given me a great opportunity to go out and try and build something for them.
In Colorado, guess what? We're all local. There's 4 local underwriters, and together the other day we have almost 125 years of local underwriting experience in Colorado. And I tell that to people all the time, and that's really the big difference. We can make local decisions quickly to get that deal to the closing table. That's the big difference.
We're a team, and we support each other and look out for each other, and it really promotes more business for us.
First American is all about a work-life balance, and the leadership is incredible because they truly care about the customers or the associates that work here.
This is our customer service department, and the marketing support services that are just completely robust. Marketing is a challenge for a lot of real estate brokers. It's something they have to do, but it takes a lot of time. It can be expensive, and we have a fulfillment solution that is far and away better than anything else that our competitors have to offer.
The leadership is very down to earth, and they move very quickly. So anytime I've needed something or had to support a customer or had to make a decision that maybe cost the company money or whatever, they're very quick to make a decision on that stuff.
You're working with people who have been in this market, in the Colorado market, for 30 plus years. At one point, First American was underwriting almost 70% of all transactions in Colorado, and some of those very people were working on those files.
I really believe our people are passionate about our company and do it better.
Morning. I'm Wes Parham, Director of Business and Professional Development for the Colorado Association of Realtors. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, on January 1st of this year, Colorado became the first state to allow the sale of recreational marijuana. It may be an understatement to suggest that this issue hasn't created a whole breadth of new implications. for our industry. And we're very fortunate to have a panel with us this morning, moderated by CAR General Counsel Steve Morgan, to discuss and provide some clarity on many of those items. And our panel will also be available to answer your questions. And I look forward to turning the program over to Steve in just a few moments. But first, I wanted to pass along a quick thank you to several of our business services partners who are helping to support our broadcast this morning. The first is Johnson Storage and Moving. Johnson is the preferred storage and moving solution to the association, which means that both your residential and commercial clients receive special incentives and rates through our program. The second is TransUnion Smartmove. CAR partnered with TransUnion to provide a reliable tenant screening solution available to our members, and you can learn more on either of those programs by visiting coloradorealtors.com under the Business Services tab. I also want to pass along a very special thank you to First American Title for their support in presenting our Webcast program, which is part of our professional development initiative here at CAR. And Casey Thornton is here with us this morning. I'd like to give her a few minutes to catch you up to speed on some of what they're working on. Casey?
Good morning. My name's Casey Thornton, Account Executive with First American Title. I wanted to fill you all in on something we've noticed going on in the marketplace recently. The most current policy that can be issued is the Alta 2006. Changes were made to that policy to make it plain language and easier for buyers to understand, as well as provide more coverage to them. It's not required that all title companies use this 2006 policy, but we've recently seen other companies issuing policies from 92 and even back to 87. This is providing less coverage for the buyers and less protection for the same premium. When you receive your title commitment, just make sure to look at Schedule A and make sure it's a 2006 Alta policy. If not, make sure to request it. Thanks so much. Enjoy the webcast.
Thanks for stopping by, Casey, and thanks again to First American for your continued support. I have just a few quick housekeeping items before I move on. We've allocated an hour and a half for today's presentation with a 10-minute break scheduled at about 10 o'clock. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type those in according to the instructions there on your screen. What we do is we collect those, we'll review them during the break, and have our panel address as many as they can when we return. Please keep in mind that due to the number of attendees that we have this morning, our panel may not be able to address all of them, but again, we'll certainly address as many as we can. Finally, I did want to make note that today's PowerPoint can be accessed through a link underneath the video screen that you're watching right now. Please feel free to print that out and use it as a resource moving forward. Our moderator this morning, as I mentioned, is Steve Morgan. Steve has been a business and real estate attorney for more than 20 years and is currently the Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel to the Colorado Association of Realtors. Steve also speaks frequently to industry groups on a variety of real estate and legal topics, and he also oversees the Car Legal Hotline, which brings him here today. And with that, Steve, I'll turn the program over to you to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Wes. Good morning and welcome to our presentation this morning. We have a lot of information to get to this morning, so we're going to get started. First of all, I'd like to welcome our panelists, Peter and Scott. Our first panelist this morning is Peter Wall with CRL Associates in Denver, where he specializes in monitoring local government issues. Peter also weighs in on special districts and a variety of public policy issues, including land use and procurement. He's incredibly knowledgeable on the history of marijuana regulation in Colorado, has done a lot of work in this area. So he's going to talk to us a little bit today about how we got to where we are today and where we're going from here. So welcome, Peter, and thank you for joining us this morning. Also joining us this morning is Scott Peterson. Scott is a commercial real estate broker and an active member of the Denver Metro Commercial Association of Realtors. Scott also sits on the CAR Legislative Policy Committee and has been very active with CAR in the past. Scott's also a licensed real estate attorney and maintains an active law practice representing individuals and businesses in real estate, business, and estate planning transactions. Scott will review both practice and legal implications that the legalization of marijuana is having in our industry. I'd also like to mention that Scott is the immediate past president of DemCar and recently won the annual DemCar Broker of the Year Award. So congratulations, Scott, on that. That's quite an achievement.
Thank you, Steve.
And thank you for joining us this morning as well. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Peter to give us a brief introduction with respect to Amendment 64 and where we go from here. So Peter?
Steve, well, thank you so much again for having me, and
You
want to
bet.
thank the Colorado Association of Realtors for this great opportunity to once again kind of get in the weeds and discuss, all things marijuana. I know it's on everyone's mind these days. If you go and ask anyone in state, out of state, they usually, ask you how things are going in Colorado with the legalization of retail marijuana. I think one of the first things that I want to talk about, and probably is most important, is this is actually not a new issue for Colorado. It's something that's been going on for many years now, pretty much 14 to be exact. And a lot of it started out in 2000. As many Colorado voters will remember, the legalization of medical marijuana was voted on with Amendment 20 in 2000. And one of the things that you didn't see actually after the passage of that vote was a lot of these dispensaries coming up. This actually was because the federal government at that point in time, marijuana was still a legal substance, and it's still illegal today. And the reality is the federal government didn't really give Colorado or any of the actual states that approved medical marijuana insight as to, what their action and potential enforcement would be. So there was this kind of gray area for folks, and this all changed in 2009 when we saw the Obama administration, with the change from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, when they really came out and said that, we're going to really end this kind of intense enforcement on both medical marijuana dispensaries and patients. So, once the federal government really gave folks, some clear direction, then, in Denver especially, you started to see in 2009 an increase in these medical marijuana dispensaries. So 9 years later, finally you saw dispensaries kind of pop up in Denver and in Colorado. And then after that, you saw Amendment 64 is obviously the big one, when Colorado actually legalized, retail or recreational marijuana. And that was actually by a vote of 55% for and 45% against. So Colorado voters are pretty overwhelming in their thoughts about actually legalizing this industry and allowing, these retail stores to exist. Before I really delve into kind of a policy discussion, one of the things that we always like to talk about and kind of re-educate folks on is what exactly Amendment 64 did. So, on the most basic level, Amendment 64 legalized the use and possession and consumption of retail marijuana for persons 21 years or older. Allowed the actual licensing of operation of these, retail stores, in addition to the growing and manufacturing and kind of product testing facilities that we saw. Allowed the actual two requirements of the state legislature and the General Assembly, the first of which actually was written inside the language of Amendment 64, and that mandated that the state legislature put an excise tax question on the ballot in November 2013. So that was for a 15% excise tax, which the first $40 million would go to public school capital construction. And then it actually asked the state legislature to come up with some, rules of governing the cultivation, processing, and then the actual sale of marijuana itself. Obviously, this is kind of a new trial by fire industry. Colorado and Washington were the first two states in the U.S. to legalize it in pretty much the world. So it's an interesting, seeing the actual legislature come up with these rules that are ground up and have kind of never before been seen. So it really is an industry that once again Colorado and Denver are building up and are leading the way on in the world. And the most important thing probably about Amendment 64 is it gave local governments this kind of carrot to allow them to develop their own specific policies, whether to either opt into retail sales or opt out, or establish these kind of temporary moratoriums, and really gave them this local control in addition to what we saw as some state regulation as well. So it's a perfect segue into which counties and cities and municipalities are going to be choosing to opt in and opt out of retail marijuana sales and the other facilities that come with the industry. I think there's kind of this common misconception that every corner of your city across the state of Colorado, whether it's the West Slope or whether it's here in Denver in the metro area, is going to have a retail store. I think that's definitely one of the biggest misconceptions, and definitely isn't going to be true. As I said before, a lot of these cities have chosen, via Amendment 64 and the regulations in Amendment 64 have chosen to opt out. So you're going to see a map a little bit later on that will really kind of paint a picture of a significant amount of the state will not actually be part of these retail marijuana sales. That's obviously the big one that we need to continue to follow is who's opting in and out, and then what kind of regulations. So, in terms of the county level, Denver is obviously the biggest one. It's going to continue to lead the way and be on the forefront. So Denver, Boulder County, Pueblo, Eagle, and Pitkin County are all some of the counties that have decided to opt in. There's also this kind of wait and see how it goes period. So you'll see counties such as Jefferson County and Adams County that have established kind of temporary bans or moratoriums to really see how these other counties, one, regulate, and to see how the actual process goes. And then finally, you'll see, a lot of these municipalities, Colorado Municipal League is one of those organizations that's been following it closely, and what they've seen out of all the municipalities, about 76% of them have chosen to opt out. So again, you have the state that's licensing, you have the counties that can choose to opt in and out, but then you actually have individual autonomy from the local level. So all those municipalities and counties really do have that choice, and a majority of them, 3/4 of the state, have really chosen to not participate in the recreational retail sales. So, where we are today, and I'll briefly kind of leave this map up there to kind of give you an idea of, again, all that red area is those counties that are not choosing to participate in the sales. The green areas, again, are those counties that have chosen to opt in, and then the other folks that have, no decision yet or establishing those temporary bans or moratoriums. It's important to kind of talk about where we are today and where we're going. So, as Wes said earlier in his introduction, January 1 was a big day here in Colorado. I mean, I think for some folks it was kind of this D-Day, and they weren't really sure what was going to happen. I mean, it's the first of its kind in Colorado. But January 1 was when we first start seeing the retail sales. So anyone 21 years or older can go into a retail licensed facility and purchase, up to 1 ounce of marijuana if they're in state, and half an ounce of marijuana if they're coming from out of state. That's obviously a huge change we've seen. We've seen it with medical marijuana, but now that these persons of age can go in and do that, it's something it's just phenomenal, and it's something that's going to be a model again for the country and the world as well. I want to kind of focus specifically on Denver and what Denver's doing, because again, they're going to be this kind of model for the rest of the state. So, by way of ordinance, Denver City Council spent a number of months, debating specific regulations that they wanted to see, these retail facilities, the growing facilities, the manufacturing facilities to have. So, what we saw is a lot of the actual medical marijuana facilities would be converting to these retail facilities, but new retail facilities would not actually be allowed until January 1, 2016. So really kind of establish that if you're already in the market and you know how to do it, let's trust in those folks that have done medical to do recreational or retail facilities. One of the big issues was, whether to do recreational facilities standalone or to do, co-location of medical marijuana stores and, these retail selling facilities. Denver City Council debated this, pretty thoroughly, and actually ended up with a model called coterminous, which means there's no actual separate, structure in between a medical facility and a retail facility, but they're actually within the same store, and where you kind of get the separation is actually at the cash register. So when someone goes up and purchases either a medical, marijuana or retail marijuana, you'll have the separation of financing, and the Department of Revenue calculates them differently. So that's kind of the interesting, one of the big issues that City Council debated. You'll see specific zoning. A lot of folks and a lot of realtors and homeowners are really worried about these stores popping up in their areas. And the reality is there's some very specific zoning here in Denver about where the stores can operate. So these kind of urban Main Street zone districts, which you're going to see on Federal, Broadway, and Colfax. And then the manufacturing and growing facilities are going to be in the industrial areas, the industrial zone parts of the city. And the big thing for folks, and you really do kind of have some power within, whether one of these facilities or a retail store locates around you, is the public hearings and the needs and desires hearings. So any medical marijuana dispensary that would relocate from its current location would actually trigger a public hearing. And then in January 1, 2016, when you have these new stores that were not a prior existing medical facility, those will trigger a needs and desires hearing, which is very similar to how alcohol is regulated in liquor stores end up in communities. And last and most importantly, want to talk about some of the policy issues and implications that we're seeing. I think one of the big things, and I know Scott's going to touch on this, so I won't try and belabor in it, but federal government. As we saw with medical marijuana, obviously, marijuana is still a Schedule I federally legal drug, so it really does raise questions for folks on, how is this going to impact me, whether I'm a buyer, a property owner, whether I'm allowing, a type of marijuana facility inside my property. So, the Obama administration's given some direction and really, said, like with medical, that they would be hands off. But again, I think one of the important things we look at is with the change of, ideology in terms of the presidency and governments, that you can see this change. So, it's kind of a fly-by-night thing. You get one thing one day and it could absolutely change tomorrow. In terms of taxes, this was always a huge question. It was a huge debate in Amendment 64 in the campaign. A lot of folks, there's kind of two ideologies, or whether we, really tax this thing, or if we tax it too much to a point where we push it back in the black market. So I think the reality is, for folks, a lot of people wanted to see that the revenues that we generate from the taxes on marijuana would exceed our expenditures. And if they didn't actually exceed the expenditures, then the end of the day is that local governments that opt in and do make these sales, there are going to be some unintended consequences and things that they need to pay for. And one of the ways that they need to do it, if they're not getting the revenue, is look towards our general fund. When you do that, you're taking money out of basic city services, infrastructure improvements, that kind of thing. I mean, these are all little things that help improve the community for folks and make communities more attractive for the folks not only living there, but then buyers as well. Issue of property rights and the constitutionality of some of the decisions made by local governments. Denver specifically is an interesting one in the sense that they adopted a specific rule about limiting the number of plants that someone could actually grow in their home. So Amendment 64 would allow someone to grow 6 plants individually within a home. If you have 3 people, it's up to 18 plants. Denver actually limited it to 12 plants within a home or residence. A lot of folks, ACLU, started to come out and take these city council on and potential lawsuits. So that's one of the implications you'll see. And I think finally, what we've seen here in Denver and the metro areas is an increase in drug use among teens. Suspensions, expulsions due to not particularly drug use, but also marijuana. And a lot of these folks, and I've heard from a lot of realtors asking about, their clients are hesitant to, locate in communities that have opted in to retail marijuana, or are going to opt in, just in the sense that they're worried about the accessibility for their children. They're worried about it for the prominence in schools. So, some interesting kind of policy issues to think about. And I think, maybe lastly, and I'll say is, there are some limited areas in which a lot of the growing and manufacturing facilities can locate now in a lot of these industrial zones. And what a lot of these dispensaries have seen already is super high demand, to the point where they're only open about a third of the hours that they're looking to be open for. So because they just don't have the actual product to meet demand. So you'll see kind of this, I think, this influx of industrial manufacturing and growing facilities, but there isn't enough land that's going to be zoned for that to really accommodate. Okay. So I think it's going to be an issue and question with the industry about looking at some potential ways that they can find, new kind of properties to locate these facilities in. And I think once you get closer to these residential neighborhoods, that's the more pushback you're going to see. Absolutely. With that, I'll
Excellent.
I'll turn it over.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. As you can tell, this topic is got a lot of issues, a lot of moving parts, whether it's lending, banking, real estate issues, all sorts of things. So one of the things you'll note at the end of your PowerPoint is there's contact information for both Peter and Scott And I'm sure that Peter would be happy to answer any questions you have with respect to what's going on in the industry. With that, let's turn to you, Scott. As I mentioned earlier, Scott not only is a practicing broker, but a licensed real estate attorney. So he brings a unique perspective. He's also got experience in both commercial and residential real estate, which, again, these issues are touching. So with that, Scott, why don't you start touching on some of the implications with respect to real estate?
You bet. Thanks, Steve. So Peter handled some of the issues as it relates to how we've gotten to this point. And I'm going to handle some of the issues related to what does it mean to real estate? What does it mean to property owners? What does it mean to buyers and sellers of real estate, investors, and most importantly for most of you, brokers? So my first slide here is a bit of a cartoon, but this is kind of a classic neighbor dispute, right? We've got marijuana in Colorado, and we've got, in this case, gun magazines and fireworks on the border of Wyoming, and two different states from a political perspective in many ways, and kind of a classic border dispute here between neighbors. So first slide of substance here is a really important point that is going to have an impact on the rest of my presentation. Marijuana is still illegal. That's a very clear statement, and I put illegal here in quotes because it applies throughout real estate in documents that any one of us deal with on a daily basis as homeowners, brokers, commercial real estate owners, etc. So despite the fact that in our Colorado state constitution marijuana is legal, there has been no change of law at the federal level. So there's been a change in the federal position, but that's not a change in law. So as and when there's a conflict between state law and federal law, specifically with respect to drugs, federal law wins. But if we look at our documents that are around every real estate transaction, most commercial and residential leases have a catch-all provision that prohibit, quote, illegal activities on the property. Most property insurance policies have exclusions for damage to the property caused by, quote, illegal activities. Most loan and financing documents contain covenants prohibiting, quote, illegal activities. Banks adhere to internal and or federally mandated lending criteria that prohibit lending for, quote, illegal purposes. And most owners associations, both commercial and residential, have covenants and restrictions that prohibit illegal activities on the property. So with that in mind, I'll get into how the fact that it is still technically an illegal activity impacts some various categories of property owners and users and brokers. So implications for real estate landlords. So one of the questions I get a lot is from property owners that say, you know, what can I do? I've got a lease in place with a tenant, and they're growing marijuana, using marijuana. What rights do I have? Well, generally speaking, real estate owners and investors have very broad flexibility to control their own property and the uses of that property with respect to marijuana and a variety of other things. So through a lease document, a landlord can specifically prohibit the use, cultivation, or sale of marijuana. And in the event that leases were initiated prior to some of this stuff being a concern for property owners, there is in most form leases, whether it's a 3-page kind of short form residential lease or whether it's a 60-page institutional commercial property lease, there is some form of catch-all provision that prohibits illegal activities in that lease document that could be relied on to enforce by a landlord, the prohibition of growth or use of marijuana on the property. Well, through a lease, a landlord could also specifically permit the use, cultivation, or sale of marijuana. And I think it's an important distinction. I don't envision a situation that it would make a lot of sense for a residential property owner to specifically permit the cultivation, use, or certainly sale of marijuana from a residential premises. In the commercial context, it certainly becomes much more important, and I'll touch on this here further in the slides. So, wide latitude for landlords to deal with marijuana on a property that they own. So, when you're contracting as a landlord to lease your property to a tenant, you have to be very, very careful. If you're going to specifically, in a case of a commercial property, permit marijuana use, cultivation, or sale from that property, you absolutely have to have a good clause that allows for very flexible termination rights on behalf of the property owner in the case that there is a change to state law or the federal position on marijuana. Again, that's an important distinction because it is just a federal position. There has been no change in federal law, and so it's important that a lease clause contemplate the ability to terminate a lease by the landlord in the event that there is a change in the federal position on marijuana. So some of the things that a property owner needs to consider as a landlord as they're getting into specifically within a lease permitting marijuana uses is property insurance. As I alluded to in the slide before, marijuana is still illegal. And if you've got a property that is a commercial grow facility, as an example, and they've got high-intensity commercial grow lights or a water system for growing, and you have a flood or water damage, or you have a fire where a commercial property is to burn down and ends up and there ends up being an insurance claim on that, it is likely, or I should say it's possible, that a property insurer could point to a clause and deny coverage based on the fact that there was an illegal activity, or that an illegal activity was the cause of the damage. To my knowledge, this stuff hasn't been through the court system in a sense to give us any real direction, and so it's not like we've got a history that we can necessarily depend on when it comes to how a court's going to handle something like that. But it is something that property owners need to be aware of now as they're entering into lease agreements. We all hear about the banking, existing mortgages and financing agreements. As I said in the slide before, very, very typically are going to prohibit, illegal. They will prohibit illegal activities on the property. Well, if you have a financing agreement, if you have a loan, a mortgage with a bank, and that's what your loan documents say, the bank theoretically would be under the ability to call the loan due or terminate the loan. I don't know that that's happened. What I do know that's happened, and it's happening very commonly, is on refinances. It's banks are being very, particularly large banks, are being very difficult when it comes to refinancing or even touching loans, new loans or refinances on properties that have marijuana uses specifically in them. So that touches on my new point: new loans and refinancing. There are alternatives. There are secondary market kinds of loans, hard money kinds of loans. Typically, they come at a pretty high cost, and so if for some reason you've got a marijuana use in your property, your loan comes due, and you need to go and obtain a new loan or somehow refinance that loan, you might be forced into the secondary market for that money and pay a much higher interest rate than you would otherwise. As a property owner, you need to be conscious of municipal zoning, deed restrictions, things that have to do with the local municipalities and what the nuances there when it comes to marijuana law. Rent collection, you probably want to agree up front with how you're going to collect rent. Again, a lot of these commercial marijuana operators aren't able to open and maintain bank accounts, and so you're seeing situations where rent is paid for with cash, and that's something that you want to at least acknowledge probably during the course of the lease agreement. And then considering the future marketability of your property, something that is or has been a dispensary or a commercial grow facility, or even in the case of a residential home, has had a pretty significant grow operation for private use, that might have an impact on the future marketability of your property. So those are some of the things to think about for landlords. Some of the things to think about as a tenant, both a residential tenant, probably less to think about, because I would be surprised that a landlord would allow specific language specifically permitting marijuana use or grow in a residential home. But you got to follow the terms of your lease. If that includes not smoking, that includes marijuana or cigarettes. I would encourage residential tenants to be responsible and respectful of other tenants in a property. Commercial tenants, you really do need to ensure that growing and or selling marijuana is an explicitly permitted use within your lease document. And there's obviously a variety of reasons for that. It's it's a conversation you need to be having with your landlord up front, that's what's going on. You're going to be making a large financial investment in your both your rent commencement and in your TIs, your tenant improvements, the money you're putting into the property to grow or sell marijuana. So consider, on your own side, wanting to have buyout language that allows you to terminate a lease in the event that there's a change in the state law or federal position. If you're operating a grow facility, you want to make sure that you're explicitly defining, the equipment, very expensive, hydroponic water systems and grow lights and additional power. Systems to the buildings, security systems, that those items are considered trade fixtures and that they're removable and they're not considered fixtures that you would lose in the event that you vacated the property. You want to agree in advance on the form of payment of rent. Make sure the landlord's comfortable if they are receiving rent in cash, that's something that they're comfortable with. You want to have discussions about landlord access to the property in the event of, for both inspection, for emergencies. Are there areas that are specifically locked off? You always want to consider any personal guarantees that might be included as you're signing a lease document. Is it your company or is it yourself individually that has liability for obligations on the lease? And then you want to consider the security interest. Often leases provide a landlord that will have a security interest or financing interest in the furniture, fixtures, equipment, inventory in a property, and so that could have an impact on your operations there as well. Implications for real estate buyers. Financing, obviously the big one. If you need it, in other words, if you don't have cash, can you get financing? Traditional sources, very, very difficult. It's not easy to get money from banks. I think, again, you've got federally insured banks that are very, very nervous about making investments in properties that are inherently going to be used for, again, quote unquote, illegal purposes. There's hard money sources and secondary kind of market sources. I think there's a lot of money available, usually comes at a pretty high price. If you're buying real estate, you want to be, if you're buying it specifically for the use, you want to be conscious of any specific zoning or municipal regulations in an area. And a lot of that has to do with proximity to schools. I touch on this later with brokers, but I would really encourage brokers to stay away from making recommendations that or marketing suggestions that a property is perfect for marijuana dispensing, marijuana growth, as I would push a buyer to really look and do their own due diligence with respect to what the local regulations are. Can you get property insurance if you're using it for a grow facility? And if you can, is it insurance that actually is going to benefit you in the event that you do have an event where you would be making a claim? If there's a change in the federal position, can you repurpose the property? If you're buying a property for the specific purposes of marijuana cultivation, as an example, it might be a great property for that because the zoning works and all the other items work with it. But if something were to change in federal law or in the federal position, then is there any other quality uses for the property, or have you just lost the context of your investment? Are you looking at buying a new home or residential facility that was a former grow operation? Again, you have to think about former property insurance claims. You want to be thinking about, was the wiring professionally done? How intensive is the electrical in the property? Are there potential mold issues from a high intensity hydroponic grow within a house? Has there been water damage? Is the property stigmatized in some way because there's been a grow operation there that has been maybe illegally dispensing marijuana as well? So those are some of the thoughts that real estate buyers need to be thinking about. Implication for real estate sellers. If you're selling a property where you have a grow operation, are there showing restrictions? Areas of the property that you can't access for showing, and that do you want, particularly with a home, if you've got a client that's selling a home, do you want to have even a private grow operation that's in the basement as people are either coming through for an open house or brokers are going through and showing the property? Again, source of funds gets back to the banking issue. Is the property even going to be financeable? And if not, through traditional sources, do you have access to money or cash to do it on your own? If you're selling a property with the income in place, in other words, you're selling an investment that has a marijuana grow or dispensing operation in it, are you pricing that based on the income you're receiving, which in many cases might be higher than a traditional market rents? But will a third-party buyer consider those rents for the purposes of establishing a cap rate on a property? And then disclosures, material adverse conditions. I guess I have a note there to ask your broker or your agent. That'll kind of take me to my next slide. So disclosures are an important topic, and always a bit of a gray area. As a general rule, I think most everybody here knows, we want to err on the side of making disclosures. If you're a selling broker, is the fact that a property was a grow or dispensary operation a material adverse condition? And I think it kind of depends on the circumstances. I mean, if you've got a situation in a home where somebody had a pretty sophisticated grow operation in their basement and they've put in a bunch of do-it-yourself electrical wiring, plumbing, done a lot of this stuff on their own, that's probably something that you want to disclose that's been taking place. There might be mold concerns, as I mentioned earlier, in a water hydroponic kind of growing environment might cause mold, and that's something that you might want to consider as you contemplate disclosures. Is the property a well-known grow facility or dispensary? Again, it gets into this kind of stigmatized nature of the property. Is the new buyer going to have somebody knocking on their door asking to, buy their marijuana? I think that's something that a new buyer probably wouldn't want to have as they're moving into a property, either on the commercial or the residential side. And so, as always, I would encourage everybody to err on the side of disclosure and sort of deal with the implications as they come up. For selling brokers, another thing to think about is marketing the property. I see, particularly on the commercial side, and this idea of something's a perfect grow facility. I would be really careful in making that representation for a variety of reasons, but most specifically, again, you need to be encouraging buyers to be doing their own due diligence to make sure that they are in fact able to comply with the municipal zoning requirements. So be very careful before you market a property as a grow or dispensary facility. And then I think when you're working with your seller client, I think you want to be, you want to be careful to set the client's expectations on price, the sales cycle, the buyer financing, and the inspection. There are more issues that might come up as you're selling a property for marijuana uses, and that can extend the sales cycle. It can affect the purchase price. It can certainly have implications on financing, and of course, it might have implications for a new buyer on the inspection piece as well. Implications for buyer brokers. If you're working with buyer brokers, Make sure your inspectors are aware, of any previous cultivation uses that you're aware of, because there will be things that I alluded to before that you'll want to be looking out for as you go through a traditional property inspection. I would again avoid representations to your clients that come to you and say, "Hey, I'd love to find a grow facility," and you're putting somebody in front of them saying, "Hey, this will be a perfect grow facility," or relying on the seller's marketing piece in that regard. Make sure your buyers are doing their own due diligence, that they're actually going to be able to use the property for their intended use in that case. I would work extra hard to qualify your buyers. It gets back to this financing issue. You might spend a lot of time with somebody and realize that they don't have the cash or access to the funds that they thought they had, because they're probably not going to get a traditional loan for those purposes. This also has to do in the Colorado commercial buy-sell agreement. There's a little box that you check there after the purchase price that says that's an affirmative representation that the buyer does have the available funds to immediately close, and those funds are verifiable. You need to make sure that your buyer clients understand when they're checking that box, if they're buying a property with cash, that they're making a proper representation in that regard. And then I would pay careful attention to the property insurance deadline and the association document review deadline in a buy-sell agreement. Property insurance, it's something that we kind of just assume, well, somebody's going to get property insurance. There can be a situation where there have been a lot of claims on something previously, and maybe there's issue there. But I would be very careful and pay attention to those deadlines. Make sure that your buyer is doing their due diligence to make sure that they're going to be able to get the insurance that they're expecting or that they're going to be required to have under the loan. And then association documents, it gets back to the idea that, many associations, both residential and commercial, are going to prohibit these types of activities, and you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that as well, if that's the buyer's intention. And for my downtown office market friends, we've got a robust commercial environment downtown in terms of leasing and sales activity, but there's a haze over Denver, as they say. So there you have it.
Great, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. As you can tell, there's just a lot of different ways that this topic affects real estate, both commercial and residential. One of the areas that I think I see the most, or that I hear the most on the hotline, really deals with the property management issue and landlords. That's where it seems to be having the most effect early on. As we move forward, Peter, one of the questions that came to mind as I was listening to you both is with respect to HOAs. Do HOAs have authority to regulate at all or to prohibit use within their complexes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question, and one of the issues that they're trying to work out right now. There actually was intent and potential of a bill in the legislature to give HOAs the authority to do that. Still in the legislature right now, and I think the main issue that we're seeing is again, it kind of gets back to the issue of constitutionality. Okay. And if it's someone's legal right that's given to them by Amendment 64, is it the legal right, again, of an HOA to really interfere? I think in some circumstances, HOAs will sit there and adopt their own policies that a lot of folks will probably follow, whether they're moving in or they're tenants now. But again, it's going to be an issue of constitutionality, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see potential kind of cases and case law in the future that addresses this of lawsuits coming up between an HOA and then an actual owner within that HOA.
So as far as right now, as far as you know, though, HOAs haven't started yet regulating or prohibiting?
No, that's not what we've seen so far.
Okay. Scott, with respect to brokers, what do you think the biggest issue brokers are facing with respect to this topic?
Well, some of the things that I touched on. I mean, I think the biggest concern is making sure that you're making proper disclosures. That's the expectation of the Real Estate Commission as they govern the behavior of brokers, and that's the expectation of your buyer and seller clients as you are investigating properties to purchase. That everything's on the table. And so I think there's enough of a gray area. You run into situations where a property owner might tell you that they don't want to disclose, and I think it leaves brokers in a precarious situation that, I'm not sure how they resolve that, candidly.
So it kind of depends on what it is they're not wanting to disclose, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
adverse material conditions material adverse conditions is a bit of a gray area for a lot of items, but this just creates another area where it's probably has already and will continue to create some level of confusion, I think.
So one of the things I think brokers need to do moving forward is when you're representing a buyer, a tenant, or a seller, whoever your client might be, is now you need to ask the question, is marijuana an issue in this transaction? Is my seller growing plants? Is my buyer going to want to grow or use? It's just a topic in general that I think brokers need to address and say, I've got a buyer, what do you want to use this property for? And if you're moving in from out of state, is marijuana involved? Are you planning on growing, smoking, things like that, so they can address it? And a lot of transactions, obviously, it won't be an issue, but certainly in the commercial area it is. Have you had clients where you've run up against some of these issues?
Yeah, I mean, in commercial, it's a little different story because you have, as I mentioned, you need to have specifically in a lease document the permitted use of either growing on a commercial basis or dispensing, selling marijuana on a retail basis. And so it definitely impacts that in more cases, and there's less of a gray area because all the cards sort of have to be out on the table, particularly in the situation of a lease.
Peter, what about multiple dwellings? So you've got doubles, or you've got 4 units and stuff, and you've got one person who wants to sit on the porch. I know when this first started coming down in Denver, it was going to be a big issue of whether people could smoke on their front porch or they couldn't. Where are we at with respect to that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of multiple dwelling units, it's definitely an issue. Now, if someone has a condo and they actually own the condo and there's a balcony on the condo, the way it works is they would be able to sit there and smoke on the balcony of a condo. Same thing in terms of a single-family dwelling unit. Folks can smoke in the backyard and they can sit on the front porch and do it, not within like a certain limitation within the sidewalk of the street. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of those big kind of hot button topics. But I think, again, I mean, to add to that, I think you will see issues in terms of those multi-dwelling units where you have units that are sharing a wall, and one unit could potentially have a pretty significant grow operation in it, and it's effects of that one unit's grow operation that can affect the other. I think you're going to see some pretty interesting relationships there. But in general, yeah, you smoke on your balcony, and that's your kind of constitutional right under Amendment 64, and then what Denver City Council's really looked at and other municipalities have done.
Excellent.
In the event that you own the property.
Exactly.
If you're a tenant in the property, it's the landlord could, through, as I mentioned, through the lease, certainly prohibit that.
Yep.
And I think what'll be an interesting topic as well as this kind of fleshes out is the how, particularly on the medical side, how it impacts the American with Disability Act, and there's some constitutionality issues there. Marijuana use is not a protected act, or you're not a protected class from a civil rights standpoint. But in the medical side, will a landlord be able to prohibit that? I don't think there's any case law at this point. But again, we're kind of in the new frontier here, and so certainly those will be issues that'll be discussed as it relates to property rights going forward.
Absolutely. With respect to inspectors going into properties now where there's grow operations, what would you recommend with respect to how inspectors treat these properties going into them?
Well, I'd pay careful attention to how it was done. I mean, I think whether you're on the residential or the commercial side, and in fact on the commercial side, I think there's probably a greater chance that you've got qualified contractors that have built out the facility and have modified the electrical and have modified any plumbing, et cetera. On the residential side, I think there's a lot of people with pretty sophisticated grow operations in their basement or their back rooms now, and I don't know necessarily that work has been done by qualified contractors. And so I would really want to be paying attention as a buyer of real estate that if that had been a component of the property previously, that work was done in a professional manner by a qualified contractor, and that there weren't issues to come up against later.
I saw recently what's happening with the commercial rates in Denver, and they're pointing to this industry as being one of the factors that's caused an increase in rates. Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's there's demand. I mean, we've got an inventory problem on the commercial side, certainly now, particularly in industrial real estate. They need more inventory because not just because of this, but certainly the marijuana industry has created a high demand for commercial real estate. I think the it was something that was very it came along at a fortuitous time when we had back in 2008, 9, 10 the market was really soft, and there was a lot of property owners specifically in Denver County and some of the areas around it that were, I don't want to say saved, but certainly benefited a great deal by the medical marijuana industry, and it probably kept some owners from losing properties that wouldn't have otherwise been leased or sold. So,
yeah, I think it's interesting to see. I mean, as Scott mentioned, I think obviously, industrial, did very well in 2009, 2010 when other areas of the sector weren't doing well, but just because of the marijuana industry. But then it's interesting to see today, the vacant. I'm not a commercial realtor, but just what I've seen is the vacancy rates of a Colorado Springs versus a Denver, whereas Colorado Springs has decided to opt out of retail marijuana sales and growing and manufacturing. You're seeing some pretty high vacancy rates there versus a Denver where, extremely low rates. So it does absolutely have an impact on whether the municipality chooses to opt in or out.
So all those counties on the map that were red, if they want to see their commercial vacancy rates go down, they know what to do.
It sure
is that what you're
it wouldn't
saying,
hurt.
Peter?
It wouldn't hurt.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, they can always go back.
there is demand.
Let me remind you, we're going to take a break here in just a few minutes. For those of you that have questions, please send those in. We're going to take a break and gather those questions and come back and answer them. We will also stay past 10:30 for those of you that have time. If you'd like, we'll continue on as long as we've got some questions. I want to go a little different direction for a second, Scott. With respect to employment compliance and employers and broker owners who have employees and marijuana use in the workplace and what's allowed from an employer's standpoint and what's prohibited. You want to start with that, Peter?
Absolutely. I mean, this was one of the issues that you saw a big debate on in the actual Amendment 64 campaign, is whether or not an employer could sit there and enforce, the marijuana use in the workplace, because it's kind of a different animal in the sense that marijuana, even if you use it, 20, 30 days, it still stays in your system. So it's an issue of, is it really like in the use workplace? And the reality is, for I think a lot of those employers that do have, specific drug policies that says, no marijuana use, and you test positive for it, they actually do have the ability to cut you loose. That's not to say, and there have been already, some lawsuits that you've seen with medical marijuana and folks and employers cutting folks loose because of medical marijuana use. And I think you'll continue to kind of see the same thing with retail marijuana. But, what we've seen so far is that it is, an employer's right. And if it's written into, kind of a contract and agreement like that, then they do have the right to terminate.
Right. Any comments on that, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, much like the property owners have the right to kind of control what happens, employers. I mean, it's created an HR dilemma for a lot of brokerages, a lot of employers in the state. It's really created an HR dilemma for employers that are national employers that do business here and have employees here, and so there are issues around it. But generally speaking, an employer is going to have pretty wide latitude to set their own internal corporate drug policies. And enforce those on that basis.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that as an employer, you can have a policy that prohibits drug use, which would include marijuana. So even if it was on their personal time, if they test positive, obviously they could be let go, as you said. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Wes here in a minute. And like I said, we're going to take a break. So if you've got those questions, I know we've been getting them in for a while here since we started. Go ahead and send those questions in. We'll take about a 5 to 10 minute break. You'll see a timer there on the screen when we're going to be back, and we'll come back and answer your questions.
Thanks, Steve. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. The purpose for taking this break is to give you an opportunity to send any questions that you may have. What we'll do, again, is collect those. We'll have our panel answer as many as they can when we return, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
The first thing is the people. Obviously, this business is about the connections you make and the people you trust. And the most important people that I trust in this industry are at this company.
The new beginning. Other companies are doing things the same way they've always done them. And so having a new opportunity to do things a different way is what really intrigued me.
I'd say from a sales perspective, what I love most is that we have really the best of both worlds. So we're a big multi-billion-dollar international company with great financials, but on the other side, we also feel very much like the small little family-run company.
I like the safety of First American, but they've got a human side to them, you know, a little softer, gentler approach. And I really appreciate that. And they've really given me a great opportunity to go out and try and build something for them.
In Colorado, guess what? We're all local. There's 4 local underwriters, and together the other day we have almost 125 years of local underwriting experience in Colorado. And I tell that to people all the time, and that's really the big difference. We can make local decisions quickly to get that deal to the closing table. That's the big difference.
We're a team, and we support each other and look out for each other, and it really promotes more business for us.
First American is all about a work-life balance, and the leadership is incredible because they truly care about the customers or the associates that work here.
This is our customer service department, and the marketing support services that are just completely robust. Marketing is a challenge for a lot of real estate brokers. It's something they have to do, but it takes a lot of time. It can be expensive, and we have a fulfillment solution that is far and away better than anything else that our competitors have to offer.
The leadership is very down to earth, and they move very quickly. So anytime I've needed something or had to support a customer or had to make a decision that maybe cost the company money or whatever, they're very quick to make a decision on that stuff.
You're working with people who have been in this market, in the Colorado market, for 30 plus years. At one point, First American was underwriting almost 70% of all transactions in Colorado, and some of those very people were working on those files.
I really believe our people are passionate about our company and do it better.
The first thing is the people. Obviously, this business is about the connections you make and the people you trust. And the most important people that I trust in this industry are at this company.
The new beginning. Other companies are doing things the same way they've always done them. And so having a new opportunity to do things a different way is what really intrigued me.
I'd say from a sales perspective, what I love most is that we have really the best of both worlds. So we're a big multi-billion-dollar international company with great financials, but on the other side, we also feel very much like the small little family-run company.
I like the safety of First American, but they've got a human side to them, you know, a little softer, gentler approach. And I really appreciate that, and they've really given me a great opportunity to go out and try and build something for them.
In Colorado, guess what? We're all local. There's 4 local underwriters, and together the other day we have almost 125 years of local underwriting experience in Colorado. And I tell that to people all the time, and that's really the big difference. We can make local decisions quickly to get that deal to the closing table. That's the big difference.
We're a team, and we support each other and look out for each other, and it really promotes more business for us.
First American is all about a work-life balance, and the leadership is incredible because they truly care about the customers or the associates that work here.
This is our customer service department, and the marketing support services that are just completely robust. Marketing is a challenge for a lot of real estate brokers. It's something they have to do, but it takes a lot of time. It can be expensive, and we have a fulfillment solution that is far and away better than anything else that our competitors have to offer.
The leadership is very down to earth, and they move very quickly. So anytime I've needed something or had to support a customer or had to make a decision that maybe cost the company money or whatever, they're very quick to make a decision on that stuff.
You're working with people who have been in this market, in the Colorado market, for 30 plus years. At one point, First American was underwriting almost 70% of all transactions in Colorado, and some of those very people were working on those files.
I really believe our people are passionate about our company and do it better.
Welcome back. We've got a lot of great questions that came in, you guys, that we'll touch on. Before we do that, would you guys like a brownie with your coffee at all, or?
You know, I already had a couple this morning, but
Okay.
thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll pass, not because
You
I'm
wanna wait till
concerned
after
about
we're done,
what,
Scott, or-
what cars put in the brownies.
Okay,
but,
well, those were made by our own Julie Woodfin, so we'll have to find out later. So a big question that we got in was regarding growing operations. What municipalities are allowing these facilities, and which ones are considering allowing grow operations? I think, Peter, with respect to sales versus growing, a lot of counties aren't going to allow retail sales. Are some of those allowing growing?
Absolutely. I think generally what we've seen is in those municipalities that are allowing, retail sales, they've opted to allow not only sales, but then the growing, the manufacturing, and even testing facilities. There's going to be a few exceptions, but certain municipalities like Commerce City, for example, their retail, actual facilities probably won't be as strong, but where they actually are going to focus on in terms of the new industry are the growing, the manufacturing, and the testing facilities, just because of the predominance of the industrial, type zone districts that you're going to see there and the type of land. So, generally, again, across the board, if they allow one, they kind of allow all to kind of be encompassing.
And I guess along those lines, Peter, does the county's choice to opt in or out affect an individual's choice to use or grow?
It does not. It does not. Again, if a county or municipality opts in or out, via Amendment 64, an individual still has the constitutional right to, possess up to 1 ounce and consume that ounce. Now, important to note that you can't do it in public. That's an issue that we've seen or can continue to see. The 420 rally in Denver has been an issue. It's going to continue to be an issue of people smoking in public. So, be sure to actually consume it in your own private residence. That's the place to do it.
I guess on a related question then, since she asked that, we have a question about people growing in their yard or growing on their property. Why don't you speak to what people are allowed to do on their own property?
Absolutely. So, the way we've seen it and the way it's written in Amendment 64 is someone is allowed to grow 6 plants, 3 of which can be actual flowering plants so you can get marijuana from, 3 not. And it's specific language, and I think this is probably going to be subject to interpretation and challengeable in the courts, but it's supposed to be grown in an enclosed space. A yard is not counted as an enclosed space. Even a greenhouse in a yard, many argue, is not an actual enclosed space. So it has to be this enclosed space within, actual residence itself.
So are they going to allow commercial growing outside at all anywhere in Colorado?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Not yet, okay.
We don't have a long enough grow season.
I guess California is going to have to help us
There
out
you
with
go.
that, right? Scott, we have a question. I have someone sent in a question. I have an owner that does not want any form of smoking on his property. If someone were to lease the property and have a medical marijuana card, can we prohibit this person from smoking on the property?
Yes. Again, you can prohibit it. I think that the medical marijuana piece will ultimately be challenged in some way. Marijuana use or users are not a protected class. The way it would be challenged, I would envision, would be under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that a person is not being provided proper accommodation for their medication. As we know, marijuana isn't just smoked. I mean, there's an edible industry that's thriving here in the state as well, and so there's a number of ways that somebody could ingest marijuana without smoking it. So I think it's a bit of a gray area, but as I said in the presentation portion, landlords, property owners have pretty wide latitude with respect to what they're going to prohibit or allow under the terms of a lease.
Yeah, so I concur with you on that. With respect to medical marijuana, even though they've got a medical card, it's, like you said, it's not a protected class. So if a landlord wants to prohibit smoking or growing on his property, he can do it, bar none. So, Scott, this one might apply to you and I, but someone asked, do we foresee a new line on the seller property disclosure form for past or present marijuana use or growth on the property? I could certainly see that coming down with the Real Estate Commission moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense in some levels when you consider the potential implications for a facility that's been used for growing. So wouldn't surprise me in the least. I mean,
I think along these lines, some people tend to think of it like we think of the meth issue.
Yeah.
certainly smoking marijuana or using it on a property wouldn't have the same impact as using meth would. But growing certainly would, because you might have alterations, like you said, in the electrical systems or in water,
Yeah, there
plumbing.
are mold issues. There's
Yeah.
water issues. There's property insurance. I mean, there's a handful of legitimate issues that the buyers of property need to be aware of as they contemplate purchasing a property that's had an intensive or even light, grow use.
Mm-hmm. Another question: many of the banks are unwilling or unable to make loans for these types of businesses. Are these banking restrictions lightening up, or are these buyers needing to still find alternative sources?
Yes and no. I think what we've seen, the federal government has given some direction on this over the last couple of months, and has I think is trying to help facilitate the idea that this industry in the state is not only using cash. And so in doing that, I think they've, and I don't want to get into the nuances of it, but they have allowed federally insured banks to, as long as they're abiding by state law, to have checking accounts, banking accounts, to lend and that sort of thing. In this case, most of the large banks are hesitant to do it. They're just conservative by nature, and they're going to remain that way, I think, until there's not just a position from the federal government, but actually a change in law. And until that occurs, I think it's going to be difficult. And so the sources are going to be hard money lenders, some secondary market type lenders, and again, will come probably at a premium in terms of interest rates.
So let's hit on that. You and I were talking about that earlier, the federal position on this versus law. And you and I were talking about how easily it could change if just the federal position changes. And we were joking along the lines that, I was joking with Peter saying, well, if Ted Cruz were to get elected in 2016 and he didn't have the same philosophy as the current administration on this, what could happen overnight?
Well, I think we've seen it already. As we've seen the change in ideology from parties with the Bush administration to the Obama administration. It really kind of paved the way for the medical marijuana industry in Colorado. So it changes by night. I mean, you could see potentially a federal crackdown on a lot of these retail facilities. The distribution, the manufacturing facilities, and potentially not only them, but property owners and folks involved with the facilities themselves. So it's doubtful. I don't think we're going to kind of see that ideology, because I really do honestly believe that this is becoming a national trend and phenomenon. I think you're going to see kind of a domino effect and more states legalize it. I'd bet that Alaska will legalize it in the upcoming election. Okay. California tried once and failed, will probably do it again successfully. Oregon tried once and failed, probably do it again. Folks like Arizona are looking at it, Massachusetts, Vermont. So I think it's out there. So I think it's starting to become ingrained and entrenched within the policies of the federal government to slowly move that direction. And not necessarily go against states' rights, especially when more and more states are going to start to legalize.
So along those lines, Peter, are you hearing that there's going to be any legislation run at the federal level anytime in the near future?
Haven't heard anything about that. Okay. Yeah, I won't speculate. Haven't heard anything, and I know they have their hands tied with lots of other stuff going on, but I wouldn't doubt it in the next 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, as the political winds shift, that it is important to keep in mind that if the political winds shift, then they could change everything, and it wouldn't even take the stroke of a pen, because again, there's never been a federal law that's changed, and so it's something that as public opinion changes, and I think in most cases the support for it grows across the country, I do think it's probably unlikely that we'll see any dramatic changes, but all it would take is the Justice Department or the executive branch of our federal government to say, we're no longer going to look the other way on this issue.
Correct.
And when that happens, theoretically, and I even if it were to happen, I don't think it's something that would say tomorrow we're going to start enforcing these laws again. I think there would be a ramp up period for states where they've allowed it, and so a property owner would have 180 days or something to transition these uses outside of their property. So it isn't something that would happen overnight. I don't really believe it's something that's going to happen overall, but if it did, then it wouldn't take a whole lot of political wind shift to make that happen.
Yeah, and again, I think that's what's keeping the banks from getting all in. You know, is the federal regulation that could change immediately, and they're left exposed.
Yeah.
With a lot of lending in this
Absolutely.
industry. Coming back to HOAs, we had someone ask a question that said their HOA has told them that they have rules prohibiting smoking and growing, and the question is, are they valid?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tough issue, and I know I touched on it, a little bit earlier with your question. I think it's important if your HOA does have those rules right now. I think it's important that you follow them. I think that there's covenants and that could potentially be in violation of those. At the same point in time, folks on the other side are going to argue that it's your constitutional right to grow and consume in your own private residence. So again, it's a new industry. It's a whole new animal. We haven't seen a lot of case law to really, lay anything down in the fine print. But, for now, I'd say really follow those to err on the safe side.
Your thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. HOAs, again, there's generally a quote-unquote illegal activities clause in most documents, and so that could apply if there's specific prohibitions against it. Which for a newer HOA, I maybe could see something like that. I would follow it. I mean, it's a recorded covenant that's attached to the property, and everybody's on notice, and that's why I would caution brokers that are representing buyers of marijuana or with the intention of using a facility for marijuana, whether it's commercial or residential, to pay particular attention to the HOA documents.
We've got a couple more questions here. Let's see. Specialize in vacant land, mostly mountain properties, some with appropriate zoning for marijuana. Can a seller request their property not be sold to a grow operation? I think with respect to that, a seller can do whatever. They don't have to sell, they can sell their property to whoever they want. So if they don't want to sell to someone who's going to bring a grow operation, then they certainly don't have to.
Yeah, again, not a protected class. I mean, it's not like you're excluding somebody that has a civil rights protection attaching to them.
Yeah.
What, if any, recent court challenges to Colorado real estate contracts to real estate professionals relating to new marijuana sales, use, and grows? I'm not aware of any court challenges yet. Are you guys?
I'm not.
Again, I think it's just too new. We're certainly going to start seeing them like we've talking about. I think the first area you're going to see them is in this medical marijuana area where someone's going to challenge their rights under ADA, like you talked about. And again, we're talking years until those cases work their way through the system too. It's not someone's going to file a case and in 3 months we're going to know.
Yeah, I think we'll see it with the ADA aspect of it potentially, a challenge based on a protected class. I think we'll see it potentially with property insurance, a claim being denied, a coverage claim being denied for an insurer, or an insurer denying coverage for an insurable event that because there was an illegal activity involved, that coverage is denied, and I think there would be a lawsuit there. So some of that stuff will materialize as we expand this within the state.
Keep moving forward. Scott, someone's asked you to elaborate on your concerns regarding former property insurance claims for a marijuana facility. He says here, does he mean the property could be denied insurance for a future owner?
Well, so yeah, potentially. I guess what I'm saying in that is much like any property insurance or the insurability of any property, if there had been previous claims against a property insurance for water damage, for any kind of fire damage or anything else, then the insurers look at that, and that's a question of the property's insurability. I mean, that's why we've had for years within the state commercial state buy-sell agreement a property insurance objection deadline, and that's because the buyer needs to go out and investigate that. I think that if something was a grow facility, either on the residential or the commercial side, that they need to be, paying that much more attention to that objection deadline and making sure that they're looking into opportunities to get insurance if there had been previous insurable events against the property.
That makes sense. One of the things I think brokers are concerned about is their liability, their exposure. What can they be held liable for? And so we have questions relating on what am I allowed to know? What should I ask about? Am I culpable in any way in illicit activity for working with such business owners? Kind of a broader question, but...
Yeah, I would say not culpable for working with them. I mean, it's the basic stuff. You got to protect yourself. You got to protect. I mean, our brokers, your time is your money, so you want to make sure that somebody's a qualified buyer, not just in a traditional sense of being a qualified buyer, that they can go out and get a loan, but they're probably not going to go get a traditional loan, at least at this point in time. And so you want to make sure that they have access to funds. On the selling side, I think the disclosures, again, we're in the new frontier. I think if we had been having this panel discussion even 12 or 18 months ago, there would have been a lot more sort of snickering about it. I know in my conversations with friends and colleagues that there's a lot of snickering about the whole topic, and that's changed even dramatically, I would say, over the last 12 months. And so I think that we will get over the next 12 plus months to a point where this is something it's a perfectly legitimate point of discussion as it involves a real estate transaction. And so I think to the extent that people can get comfortable with that when you're representing a buyer or a seller or a user of a marijuana-related real estate, to start having those discussions now.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what I said earlier. When you're working with a buyer, a seller, or a landlord, you just need to start asking those questions up front. Is it going to be an issue in your transaction? Is your seller growing or using? Things like that, because it's going to go into effect of showing houses. And what about showing a buyer? You take a buyer into a house and there's a grow operation going on. Any thoughts on that, if that was your buyer, your client?
Well, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily an issue, with the exception of the things that we've already talked about. If I was marketing a property, if I was a seller's agent, and I had a residential grow operation, I would probably encourage my seller to kind of wrap that up prior to putting the property on the market, because I just wouldn't want a family, or I wouldn't want the liability associated with unknown third parties walking through a grow operation, even if it was just a private personal one. And so it just makes sense, if you're going to put your home on the market, you might kind of wind that piece of it down and not, for the period of time that your house is on the market, want to have that going on. I mean, I can't imagine open houses and those kinds of things on the residential side. On the commercial side, some of these facilities are just strictly grow, and you're not going to necessarily wind that down, but you have to be thinking about access to the property. It's not as if you can just sort of show up and walk your buyer through at any given time. The tenant's probably going to want to have some ability to to tour around with the people, unlock doors, let people in, but I wouldn't have necessarily specific concerns related to the previous use, other than what we've already discussed.
Yeah, I had a call last week actually on the hotline with respect to a broker that had leased a property to a tenant with no knowledge that their actual intent was to set up a grow operation there, and it never came up. But they actually went under lease, and then the landlord and broker found out afterwards that's what they were wanting to do. And it was a big issue about terminating the lease, and they'd already paid a deposit and all those types of things. But
I think if you have a lease where it's just not addressed, again, I would look, and you're a landlord, I would look at your lease and make a determination if you have that sort of catch-all clause that prohibits illegal activities within the premises. If you do, then I would argue you have a pretty good opportunity, or at least a pretty good right, to enforce that as it relates to marijuana growth within particularly a residential premises.
Agreed. Peter, someone's asked about where clients can find out more about zoning for cultivation.
Absolutely. Well, in terms of cultivation, there are a couple of different zone districts that are allowed. I mean, at least in Denver, all the industrial districts. So you have IMX, which is industrial mixed use. You have IA, which is an industrial light, and then you have IB, which is kind of an industrial general. That's where the allowances you're generally going to find in Denver. In terms of other municipalities, and again, Denver zoning code, if you go online and go to Denver and look up Denver zoning code, they'll give you a little bit more information on where you're allowed to grow, what you're not to do, kind of operations and regulations like that. In terms of other municipalities, again, you're going to find a lot of it in their kind of industrial zone districts. And again, a lot of these municipalities just getting out there and understanding this industry have kind of produced some writing on where it's allowed. And it's usually on their website now in terms of regulations if they've chosen to opt in and allow the growing and cultivation facilities.
Excellent. Well, with that, gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us again today. It's been great having you, Peter and Scott. I know our members appreciate it. And for those of you that want to share this with your office, please be reminded that we record these webcasts, so you can refer this out to your colleagues to view it at a future time. Check out our website for future webcasts that are coming up in the future, and we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks again to our panel. This was extremely valuable information this morning, and we are very appreciative of each of you for lending us your time and your expertise. Thanks again to Johnson Storage and Moving and to TransUnion Smartmove, and especially First American Title for their continued support of our program. And thank you for joining us. You can find a full schedule of upcoming webcasts by visiting coloradorealtors.com. Our next presentation will be a legislative update from our government affairs team downtown. That will be on March 26th, and you can register for that on our website. Another easy way to follow our webcast program is to receive automated updates on upcoming presentations. Just click on the follow button there on the right-hand side of your screen, and that is it from here. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
The first thing is the people. Obviously, this business is about the connections you make and the people you trust. And the most important people that I trust in this industry are at this company.
The new beginning. Other companies are doing things the same way they've always done them. And so having a new opportunity to do things a different way is what really intrigued me.
I'd say from a sales perspective, what I love most is that we have really the best of both worlds. So we're a big multi-billion-dollar international company with great financials, but on the other side, we also feel very much like the small little family-run company.
I like the safety of First American, but they've got a human side to them, you know, a little softer, gentler approach, and I really appreciate that, and they've really given me a great opportunity to go out and try and build something for them.
In Colorado, guess what? We're all local. There's 4 local underwriters, and together the other day we have almost 125 years of local underwriting experience in Colorado. And I tell that to people all the time, and that's really the big difference. We can make local decisions quickly to get that deal to the closing table. That's the big difference.
We're a team, and we support each other and look out for each other, and it really promotes more business for us.
First American is all about a work-life balance, and the leadership is incredible because they truly care about the customers or the associates that work here.
This is our customer service department, and the marketing support services that are just completely robust. Marketing is a challenge for a lot of real estate brokers. It's something they have to do, but it takes a lot of time. It can be expensive, and we have a fulfillment solution that is far and away better than anything else that our competitors have to offer.
The leadership is very down to earth, and they move very quickly. So anytime I've needed something or had to support a customer or had to make a decision that maybe cost the company money or whatever, they're very quick to make a decision on that stuff.
You're working with people who have been in this market, in the Colorado market, for 30 plus years. At one point, First American was underwriting almost 70% of all transactions in Colorado, and some of those very people were working on those files.
I really believe our people are passionate about our company and do it better.